Marcus Thompson had been running on 3 hours of sleep for the past week, juggling his job at the auto repair shop and single-handedly raising his 8-year-old daughter Emma when he rushed into Lincoln Elementary at 6:30 p.m. to pick up Emma. From after-school care, he expected to find the usual chaos of tired kids and equally exhausted staff. Instead, he found something that would change everything he thought he knew about his daughter's teacher. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for youth. Fluorescent lights in the hallway flickered as Marcus hurried down the familiar corridor, his work boots echoing against the polished floors. He was late again, and the guilt gnawed at him like it did every evening. Since Sarah's accident 2 years ago, these moments had become routine, the frantic rush from work, the apologetic smile to whoever was watching Emma, the promise to himself that tomorrow would be different. As he approached Mrs. Chen's third-grade classroom, Marcus noticed something unusual. The door was slightly ajar and warm light spilled into the darkened hallway. He could hear Emma's voice, animated and happy in a way that had become increasingly rare at home. Marcus slowed his pace, curiosity overriding his urgency. Through the crack in the door, he saw his daughter sitting at a small table across from her teacher, Mrs. Lisa Chin. Emma was holding up a piece of paper, beaming with pride as she read aloud. Mrs. Chin sat with her full attention, focused on Emma, nodding encouragingly and occasionally offering gentle corrections. What struck Marcus wasn't just the scene itself, but the time. It was well past 6:30. Nearly an hour after the official after-school program ended, Marcus knocked softly and pushed the door open. "Sorry I'm late," he began, but Mrs. Chen simply smiled and gestured for him to sit. "Emma was just showing me her story about the brave princess who saves the kingdom," Mrs. Chen said, her voice warm with genuine interest. "Would you like to hear it?" Emma's eyes lit up and she immediately launched into her tale. She read. Marcus noticed details he'd missed in their hurried evenings at home. His daughter's vocabulary had expanded significantly. Her confidence in reading was growing, and she was incorporating complex ideas he hadn't realized she understood. When Emma finished, Mrs. Chen clapped enthusiastically. "Ah! That was wonderful. Emma, I especially loved how you described the princess's courage. Tomorrow we can work on that ending you mentioned wanting to change." Emma gathered her backpack, chattering excitedly about her plans for the story. As she skipped ahead toward the car, Marcus lingered in the doorway. The question that had been building in his mind finally surfaced. "Double quotes, Mrs. Chen? Can I ask you something? Why do you stay so late? I mean, I know Emma sometimes needs extra time with her reading, but you're here every day, long after you're supposed to leave." Mrs. Chen paused in organizing papers on her desk. She looked up at Marcus with an expression he couldn't quite read, part sadness, part determination. For a moment, she seemed to be weighing her words carefully. "Mr. Thompson, would you mind if I asked you something first? When you were Emma's age, did you have someone who believed in you? Someone who saw potential in you that maybe you couldn't see in yourself?" The question caught Marcus off guard. He thought back to his own childhood, the chaos of his parents, divorce, the string of schools as they moved frequently, the teachers who saw him as just another disruptive kid acting out. There had been one teacher, Mr. Rodriguez, in 5th grade, who had taken time to talk with him after class, who had encouraged his interest in fixing things, who had made him feel like he mattered. "Yeah, actually. My 5th grade teacher, Mr. Rodriguez. He's probably the reason I ended up becoming a mechanic instead of dropping out." Mrs. Chen nodded knowingly. "I had a teacher like that too. Mrs. Patterson, 2nd grade. I was the quiet kid in the back who barely spoke English. My parents worked 3 jobs between them and couldn't help with homework. Mrs. Patterson stayed after school with me every day for months, helping me not just with English but showing me that learning could be exciting." She walked over to the window, looking out at the parking lot where Emma was likely already buckled into Marcus's pickup truck. "Emma reminds me of myself at that age. Bright, imaginative, but carrying weight that no 8-year-old should have to carry. I see how hard you're working, Mr. Thompson. I see how much you love her. But I also see a little girl who's trying to be perfect. Because she's afraid of being one more thing her dad has to worry about. Marcus felt something tighten in his chest. He'd noticed Emma's recent tendency to apologize for everything spilling. Her juice taking too long to tie her shoes, asking for help with homework. He'd attributed it to her missing her mother, but Mrs. Chen's words suggested something deeper. She talks about you constantly, Mrs. Chen continued. How hard you work, how tired you are, how she wishes she could help you more. She's 8 years old, and she's already trying to shrink herself to make your life easier. The weight of this revelation settled over Marcus like a heavy blanket. He'd been so focused on providing for Emma, on making sure she had everything she needed, that he'd missed the emotional burden she was carrying. The reading struggles aren't really about reading, Mrs. Chen said gently. They're about confidence. Emma is incredibly bright, but she's afraid to make mistakes because she sees how much pressure you're under when she's here with me away. From all that worry, she flourishes. Mrs. Chen returned to her desk and picked up a folder. Inside were dozens of Emma's assignments, stories, and drawings. Marcus had seen some of these at home, but here they were organized, celebrated, treated as treasures. I stay late because Emma needs this space. She needs someone who has time to listen to her stories, to let her work through problems without rushing, to show her that learning can be joyful instead of stressful. I stay late because right now, this is where she feels safe to be a kid. Marcus looked through the folder, seeing his daughter's work through new eyes. There were stories about families, about missing people, about brave children who saved the day. There were math problems worked out with careful precision, science observations filled with wonder, and art projects that showed a creativity he hadn't fully appreciated. But more than that, Mrs. Chen said, her voice growing softer. I stay late because I remember what it felt like to be the kid whose parent couldn't make it to the school play, whose homework got forgotten in the chaos of survival, whose teacher was the only adult who had time to really listen. I stay late because every child deserves to have at least one person who shows up for them consistently, who sees their potential, who refuses to give up on them. Marcus stood there holding Emma's folder, feeling as though he was seeing his daughter. For the first time, through someone else's eyes? The silence stretched between him and Mrs. Chen, filled with the weight of revelations he wasn't sure he was ready to process. There's something else, Mrs. Chen said. Moving to a corner of the classroom where a small bookshelf held what appeared to be student journals, she pulled out a blue notebook with Emma's name written in careful cursive on the cover. Emma has been writing in this journal during our after-school time. She doesn't know I read them, but I checked to make sure she's processing things in a healthy way. She opened the journal to a page marked with a small sticky note. This entry is from last Tuesday, after you had to work late because of that emergency repair job. Marcus took the journal, his hands trembling slightly as he read his daughter's words. Today Dad looked so tired when he picked me up. His eyes had those dark circles again, like when Mom first went to heaven. I don't want to tell him about the math test I failed because he already worries about money and fixing cars and making sure I eat vegetables. Sometimes I pretend I'm not scared of the dark, so he doesn't have to buy me a nightlight. Mrs. Chen says it's okay to need things. But I don't want to be another thing that's broken that Dad has to fix. The words blurred as Marcus felt tears welling up. He had no idea that Emma was carrying this burden, that his 8-year-old daughter was trying to protect him from her own needs and fears. She writes about you with such love, Mrs. Chen said softly, but also with such worry for someone so young. Last week, she wrote about how she heard you crying in the shower and thought it was her fault because she needed help with her science project. Marcus remembered that night. It had been the anniversary of Sarah's accident, and the grief had hit him unexpectedly while he was getting ready for bed. He thought Emma had been asleep, but apparently she'd heard everything and internalized it as her own failure. Mrs. Chen flipped to another page. No, but look at this entry from yesterday. Marcus read. Mrs. Chen taught me about butterflies today. She said they start as caterpillars who think the world is ending when they go into their cocoon. But really, they're becoming something beautiful. She said sometimes families are like that too. Maybe Dad and I are in our cocoon right now, and we don't know what kind of beautiful we're becoming yet. I'm going to try to be patient with the dark. Emma's incredibly wise for her age, Mrs. D. Chen said. But wisdom shouldn't be a burden for a child. It should be a gift they can explore safely. Marcus closed the journal and looked around the classroom with new eyes. He noticed things he'd missed in his rushed pickups: the reading corner with soft pillows and warm lighting, the wall of student artwork where Emma's drawings were prominently displayed, the small table where he'd found them working together with supplies that clearly weren't standard school issue. "You've been buying things for this classroom, haven't you?" he asked. "The books, the supplies, the comfortable seating. This isn't all from the school budget." Mrs. Chen smiled, neither confirming nor denying his observation. "Teaching isn't just about curriculum, Mr. Thompson. It's about creating an environment where children feel safe to learn, to make mistakes, to be themselves. Sometimes that requires going beyond what's provided." She walked over to a bulletin board covered with photos. Marcus was surprised to see several pictures of Emma. Emma reading to a kindergarten class, Emma helping a classmate with a math problem, Emma presenting her butterfly project to another teacher. "Emma has become one of my classroom leaders," Mrs. Chen explained. "When she feels confident and supported, she naturally wants to help others. She's been reading to the younger students twice a week, and she's developed a real gift for explaining things in ways other children understand." Marcus stared at the photos, seeing a version of his daughter he rarely witnessed at home. Here, Emma looked relaxed, confident, joyful. The contrast with the careful, apologetic child he'd been living with was stark. "Why haven't I seen this side of her?" he asked, more to himself than to Mrs. Chen. "Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Because at home, she's trying to be your caretaker," Mrs. Chen said gently. "She's appointed herself as your emotional guardian, which doesn't leave much room for her to just be a kid. Here, she knows her only job is to learn and grow." Mrs. Chen pulled out a chair and gestured for Marcus to sit down. "Mr. Thompson, can I share something with you? I've been teaching for 15 years, and I've worked with many single parents. The ones who struggle the most aren't the ones who don't care. They're the ones who care so much that they forget to take care of themselves." She sat across from him, her expression serious but kind. "Emma told me you haven't taken a day off in 8 months. She said you eat cereal for dinner most nights because you're too tired to cook after making sure she has a proper meal. She knows you're selling your tools to pay for her dance classes." Marcus felt exposed, as though all his careful attempts to shield Emma from their financial struggles had been transparent to her all along. "The thing is," Mrs. Chen continued, "children learn more from what we do than what we say. Emma's learning that love means sacrifice to the point of self-destruction. She's learning that her needs are burdens. She's learning that asking for help is weakness." The truth of her words hit Marcus like a physical blow. He thought of all the times Emma had started to ask for something, then stopped herself. All the times she'd said never mind when he looked overwhelmed. All the times she'd insisted she wasn't hungry when he was clearly struggling to put dinner together. "But I want to tell you what else she's learning here," Mrs. Chen said, her tone shifting to something warmer. "She's learning that it's okay to have needs. That asking questions is how we grow. That making mistakes is part of learning. That she's worthy of attention and care simply because she exists." Mrs. Chen stood and walked to her desk, returning with a small wooden box. "Emma made this in our after-school art time. She wanted to give it to you, but she was worried you'd think it was silly." Marcus opened the box to find a collection of small items: a smooth stone painted blue, a origami crane made from newspaper, a bracelet woven from colorful string, and a small card with Emma's handwriting, "For Dad's worry stones. Mrs. Chen says worry stones help people feel calm. I made different ones for different worries. Blue for missing mom, crane for flying above problems, bracelet for remembering I love you." The simple thoughtfulness of the gift, the evidence of Emma's deep understanding of his struggles, overwhelmed him. He realized that while he'd been trying to protect her from his pain, she'd been trying to heal it. "She spends a lot of our time together making things for you," Mrs. Chen said. "Cards, drawings, little crafts. She has a whole collection she's saving for when you're not so tired. She's been planning a special dinner she wants to cook for you, complete with handwritten menus and decorations." Marcus looked up at Mrs. Chen, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time. This woman had been caring for his daughter in ways he hadn't even realized were needed. She'd been providing emotional support, creative outlet, academic enrichment, and unconditional positive attention. She'd been filling gaps he didn't even know existed. "Mrs. Chen," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "I don't know how to thank you. I didn't realize. I thought I was doing everything she needed." "You're doing everything you know how to do," she replied firmly. "You're doing it with more love and dedication than many parents with far more resources." Emma knows she's loved, Mr. Thompson. That's not the problem. She paused, choosing her words carefully. The problem is that love without boundaries becomes overwhelming for a child. Emma needs to know that she's not responsible for your happiness or your healing. She needs permission to be 8 years old. Mrs. Chen walked to the window and pulled down the shade, creating a more intimate atmosphere in the classroom. Fluorescent lights seemed harsh now, so she switched them off and turned on a small lamp on her desk, casting a warm glow over their conversation. "Mr. Thompson, there's something I need to tell you about Emma's academic performance that might surprise you," she said, settling back into her chair. "On paper, Emma appears to be struggling with reading comprehension and math concepts. Her test scores don't reflect her true abilities, and I've been documenting why." She opened a different folder, this one filled with charts and observations. Emma's anxiety peaks during timed tests. Her hands shake. She second-guesses answers she knows. She often leaves questions blank, not because she doesn't know the answer, but because she's afraid of being wrong. Last month, I gave her the same math test in 2 different settings. Once in the regular classroom with time pressure, and once here after school with no time limit and verbal encouragement. Mrs. Chen showed Marcus the test papers. The first was barely half completed, with eraser marks and crossed-out answers. The second was nearly perfect, with clear work shown and confident responses. "The difference isn't in Emma's ability," Mrs. Chen explained. "It's in her emotional state. When she feels safe and supported, she excels. When she feels pressure or fear of disappointing someone, she shuts down." Marcus studied the papers, recognizing something painfully familiar. "I do the same thing," he admitted quietly. "At work, when the boss is watching over my shoulder, I make mistakes I'd never make otherwise." I never connected that Emma might be experiencing the same thing. "Emma has developed what we call perfectionist paralysis," Mrs. Chen continued. "She's so afraid of making mistakes that she'd rather not try at all. This shows up in her reluctance to raise her hand in class, her tendency to erase her work multiple times, and her habit of asking for permission for things that don't require permission." She pulled out a recording device. "I hope you don't mind, but I recorded Emma reading. Yesterday, with her permission, I want you to hear something." The recording began with Emma's voice, hesitant at first, reading a story about a young explorer. As she read, her confidence grew, her voice became animated, and she began adding character voices and dramatic pauses. By the end, she was completely absorbed in the story, reading with fluency and expression that Marcus had never heard before. "That's not the same child who struggles to read at home," Marcus said, amazed. "Because at home, she's performing for an audience she desperately wants to please," Mrs. Chen explained. "Here she's reading for the joy of it. The difference is profound." Mrs. Chen stood and moved to a cabinet, pulling out what appeared to be a thick portfolio. "Emma and I have been working on something special during our time together." "She doesn't." "No, I'm planning to show this to you, but I think you need to see it." The portfolio contained a project Emma had been developing over several weeks, a detailed plan for helping her father's auto repair business. She had drawn diagrams of the shop layout, written a list of services they could offer, created a budget with surprisingly accurate estimates for an 8-year-old, and even designed a logo. Emma has been researching auto repair businesses. During computer time, Mrs. Chen said, she's learned about customer service, marketing, and basic business principles. She wants to help you expand the shop, maybe hire an assistant so you won't be so tired.
Oh.
Marcus flipped through the pages, astonished by the thoroughness and creativity of Emma's work. She had interviewed other students about their family cars, researched competitors in the area, and even drafted a letter to the local newspaper proposing a community car care program where local mechanics would provide free basic maintenance. 2 elderly residents? She did all this herself? Marcus asked. It's minimal guidance from me. Emma has an exceptional mind for problem solving and planning. She sees patterns and connections that many adults miss. But more importantly, she has a heart that wants to serve others. Mrs. Chen turned to a section of the portfolio labeled Phase 1. Emma had outlined a step-by-step plan that started with small changes, organizing the shop's tools more efficiently, creating a comfortable waiting area for customers, and establishing a system for tracking regular maintenance schedules. She calculated that if you organized the shop according to her system, you could save approximately 45 minutes per day, Mrs. Chen said with a smile. She timed herself organizing our classroom supply closet and extrapolated the data. Found himself laughing despite the emotional weight of the evening. That sounds exactly like something Sarah would have done. She was always making lists and systems to make our lives more efficient. Emma talks about her mother often, Mrs. Chen said gently. Not with sadness, but with pride. She tells stories about how her mom taught her to braid friendship bracelets, how she would make pancakes in fun shapes, how she always knew exactly what to say when Emma was scared. She flipped to another section of the portfolio where Emma had written a letter titled To Mom in Heaven. Marcus's breath caught as he read his daughter's words about wanting to make her mother proud, about taking care of her father, about the things she wished she could still share with her. Emma has been carrying grief that she doesn't fully understand, Mrs. Chen observed. She's 8 years old, trying to fill a role that was never meant to be hers. She's appointed herself as the family's emotional caretaker, the keeper of memories, and your personal support system. Mrs. Chen closed the portfolio and looked directly at Marcus. What Emma needs isn't to be your caretaker. What she needs is to be allowed to miss her mother without feeling guilty, to have her own dreams without worrying about your reaction, and to make mistakes without feeling like she's adding to your burden. She walked to another area of the classroom, where a comfortable reading chair sat surrounded by plants and soft lighting. This is Emma's favorite spot. She comes here when she needs to think, or when she's feeling overwhelmed. Last week she told me that she wishes she could create a space like this at home for you, somewhere you could sit quietly without worrying about bills or work or whether she's eaten enough vegetables. Now Marcus could picture Emma curled up in that chair, her mind working through problems that should be far beyond her years. He realized that while he'd been focused on providing for her physical needs, Mrs. Chen had been nurturing her emotional and intellectual growth. Mrs. Chen, I have to ask, Marcus said, his voice heavy with something between gratitude and guilt. Why are you doing all this? I mean, Emma's just one student out of many. You must have your own family, your own life. Why are you investing so much time and energy in her? Mrs. Chen was quiet for a long moment, her expression thoughtful. When she finally spoke, her voice carried a weight that suggested she was sharing something deeply personal. Mr. Thompson, do you remember what it felt like to be 8 years old and believe that you were responsible for your parents' happiness? Do you remember the weight of trying to be perfect so that the adults in your life wouldn't have one more thing to worry about? Marcus nodded, thinking of his own childhood and the way he'd tried to be invisible during his parents' messy divorce. Remember, Mrs. Chen continued, and I remember what it felt like when one teacher, just one, saw through my carefully constructed mask and gave me permission to be a child again. Mrs. Patterson didn't just teach me English. She taught me that I was worthy of care, that my needs mattered, that making mistakes was part of growing up. She looked toward the door where Emma had left earlier, her expression soft with affection. Emma reminds me so much of myself at that age. Brilliant, caring, determined to save everyone around her, but also scared, overwhelmed, and carrying burdens that were never meant to be hers. Mrs. Chen moved to her desk and pulled out a worn photo from her wallet. It showed a young Asian girl, perhaps 7 or 8, standing beside an older woman in front of a classroom. The child looked serious, almost worried, while the woman's arm around her shoulders conveyed warmth and protection. This is me with Mrs. Patterson, she said, handing Marcus the photo. Naked on the last day of 2nd grade, 1995. I kept this photo on my desk through high school, college, and every year of my teaching career. Marcus studied the image. Seeing the resemblance between the worried child in the photo and the Emma He was beginning to understand more clearly. My parents had come to America 3 years before this photo was taken, Mrs. Chen continued. My father worked the night shift at a factory. Mother cleaned office buildings early in the morning and worked at a restaurant in the evenings. They were gone before I woke up and came home after I was asleep most days. She sat back down, her fingers tracing the edge of the photo. I was what teachers now call a parentified child. I managed my own homework, packed my own lunches when there was food available, and walked myself to and from school. I became an expert at being invisible, at not needing anything from anyone. Marcus felt a chill of recognition. That's what Emma's becoming, isn't it? It's what she's already become, Mrs. Chen said softly. The difference is that you're present and loving, which makes her burden even heavier. She can see your pain, your exhaustion, your struggle. So she's decided that the way to love you is to need nothing from you. Mrs. Chen stood and walked to a bulletin board covered with children's artwork. She pointed to a drawing Emma had made weeks earlier, a family portrait showing a man working under a car while a small girl sat nearby reading a book, both figures surrounded by dark scribbles. Emma drew this during our unit on families. When I asked her to tell me about it, she said the dark parts were worry clouds, and that she was reading quietly so the worry clouds wouldn't get bigger. She moved to another drawing, this one showing the same figures, but surrounded by bright colors and sunshine. This is the picture she drew yesterday. After we talked about families helping each other instead of protecting each other from themselves, the contrast was striking. In the second drawing, the man and child were working together under the car. Both smiling, tools scattered around them in an organized way that suggested collaboration rather than lonely struggle. What changed between these two drawings? Asked, we had a conversation about the difference between helping and hiding, Mrs. Chen explained. I told Emma about a student I had several years ago whose father was also a single parent struggling with work and grief. This little boy had decided he could help his father by never asking for anything, never showing when he was scared, and never admitting when he needed help. Mrs. Chen's expression grew sad. A child ended up in my classroom because he'd been caught stealing food from other students' lunches. It's not because his father wouldn't feed him, but because he'd decided. His hunger was his problem to solve. He was 6 years old. Marcus felt his heart sink. What happened to him? It took months of work with both the child and the father, but eventually we helped them understand that love doesn't mean suffering in silence. The father learned that his son needed to see him take care of himself too. The son learned that asking for help wasn't a betrayal of his father's efforts. Mrs. Chen returned to her desk and pulled out another folder. This one labeled with Emma's name and marked intervention plan. Mr. Thompson, I need to be direct with you about something. Emma is exhibiting signs of childhood anxiety and depression that, if left unaddressed, could develop into more serious issues. She opened the folder to reveal detailed observations, behavior tracking sheets, and consultation notes. I've been documenting patterns in Emma's behavior with the school counselor's knowledge. Emma has been having what we call masked panic episodes during tests and group activities. Marcus leaned forward, alarmed. Panic episodes. She's never mentioned anything like that, because she's learned to hide them, Mrs. Chen explained. She holds her breath, clenches her fists under her desk, and forces herself to appear calm. After these episodes, she often asks to use the bathroom and comes back with red eyes, but she never admits to crying. She showed Marcus a chart tracking Emma's behavior over several weeks. The episodes correlate directly with activities where performance is measured or where she might disappoint an adult. They're most frequent on days when you've had to work late or when she knows money is particularly tight. Marcus stared at the documentation, feeling as though he was learning about a stranger who happened to share his daughter's name. How could I not know this was happening? Because Emma has become an expert at protecting you from her pain, Mrs. Chen said gently. Children are remarkably skilled at reading their parents' emotional capacity and adjusting their behavior accordingly. She flipped to a section of the folder labeled Positive Interventions. The good news is that Emma responds beautifully to specific types of support. When she feels genuinely safe to express uncertainty or make mistakes, her anxiety drops dramatically. Page detailed various strategies Mrs. Chen had implemented, allowing Emma to take breaks during stressful activities, providing fidget tools to help with anxiety, creating opportunities for Emma to help other students, which boosted her confidence. and establishing regular check-ins about feelings rather than just academic progress. Emma has also responded well to what we call reframing conversations, Mrs. Chen continued. Instead of asking how was school, I ask what made you curious today. Instead of did you do well on the test, I ask what did you learn about yourself while taking the test. She showed Marcus a log of Emma's responses to these different types of questions. The contrast was remarkable when asked traditional questions. Emma's answers were brief and focused on pleasing the adult. When asked the reframed questions, her responses were detailed, thoughtful, and revealed her natural curiosity and intelligence. There's something else, Mrs. Chen said, her tone becoming more serious. Emma has been asking questions about her mother's accident. Specifically, she's been trying to understand if there was something she could have done to prevent it. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. He'd been so careful never to discuss the details of Sarah's car accident in front of Emma, believing he was protecting her from painful knowledge. She overheard a conversation between you and your brother last month, Mrs. Chen explained. Something about Sarah being distracted because Emma had been sick that week, and how if Emma hadn't needed to go to the doctor, Sarah might not have been driving on that particular road at that particular time. Marcus closed his eyes, remembering the conversation with his brother Tom. They'd been discussing the cruel randomness of the accident, how a routine trip to Emma's pediatrician had put Sarah in the path of a drunk driver. He thought Emma had been asleep on the couch. Emma has been carrying the belief that her mother's death was somehow her fault, Mrs. Chen continued. This explains a lot about her behavior, the perfectionism, the self-denial, the desperate need to not be trouble for you. She pulled out Emma's journal again, turning to an entry Marcus hadn't seen before. She wrote this 2 weeks ago. If I hadn't gotten sick, Mom would still be alive. I have to be extra good now, so nothing bad happens to Dad because of me. Mrs. Chen says it's not my fault. But I know it is, because I was the reason Mom was driving that day. Marcus felt as though the floor had dropped out from under him. His daughter had been carrying this devastating guilt for who knows how long, and he'd been completely unaware. Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Chen said, her voice firm but compassionate. Emma needs professional help to work through this trauma and guilt. But more than that, she needs you to have honest conversations with her about her mother's death, about your grief, and about the difference between explanation and blame. She leaned forward, her expression intense. Right now, Emma is trying to love you by disappearing. She's trying to honor her mother's memory by being perfect. She's trying to prevent future tragedy by controlling everything she can control, which is mainly herself. Mrs. Chen stood and walked to the window, looking out at the dark parking lot. Emma stays late with me not just because she needs academic support, but because this classroom has become the only place where she feels safe to exist without constantly monitoring her impact on others. The weight of Mrs. Chen's revelations settled over Marcus like a heavy blanket. He sat in the small classroom chair, his large frame folded awkwardly, holding his daughter's journal and feeling as though he was meeting Emma for the first time. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, and somewhere in the distance, a janitor's cart rattled down the hallway. Mrs. Chen, Marcus said finally, his voice barely above a whisper, I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to undo the damage I've caused by not seeing what was right in front of me. Mrs. Chen returned to her seat, her expression patient but determined. Mr. Thompson, you haven't caused damage. You've been surviving an impossible situation while loving your daughter with everything you have. The fact that you're here, listening to this, asking these questions, that's not the response of a father who's failing. That's the response of a father who's ready to grow. She opened yet another folder, this one thick with research articles, therapy recommendations, and detailed plans. Over the past month, as I've been documenting Emma's needs, I've also been researching resources for families in your situation. I've spoken with the school counselor, consulted with child psychologists, and reached out to community organizations that specialize in helping single-parent families navigate trauma and loss. Marcus looked up, surprised by the extent of her preparation. You've been planning this conversation. I've been hoping for this conversation, Mrs. Chen corrected. Emma needs intervention, but not the kind that separates her from you or makes you feel like you're failing as a parent. She needs intervention that strengthens your relationship and gives you both tools to heal together. She pulled out a business card and handed it to Marcus. Dr. Sarah Martinez is a family therapist who specializes in childhood grief and anxiety. She's particularly skilled at working with families where a child has taken on inappropriate emotionally and responsibility. I've already spoken with her about Emma's situation, with the understanding that I would only share details if you were open to seeking help. Marcus studied the card, noting that the office was only 15 minutes from his shop. How much does something like this cost? I'm barely keeping up with Emma's school expenses and basic needs. Dr. Martinez works with a sliding fee scale, and there are several grants available for single parents dealing with trauma-related family issues, Mrs. Chen explained. I've already done the preliminary research on financial assistance. Investment in Emma's mental health now will prevent much more expensive interventions later. She showed him a packet of information about various support programs. There's also a support group for single fathers that meets at the community center on Saturday mornings. They provide childcare during the meetings, and many of the fathers have dealt with similar challenges. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the thoroughness of Mrs. Chen's research, but also relieved that there might be a path forward. Why would you do all this work for one student? Mrs. Chen smiled, the first genuinely happy expression Marcus had seen from her all evening. As Emma isn't just one student, Mr. Thompson. She's one student who has the potential to become an extraordinary adult if we can help her heal now. But more than that, she's one student whose father loves her enough to sit in an uncomfortable chair at 7 o'clock at night and listen to difficult truths about his parenting. She stood and walked to a bulletin board covered with thank you notes from former students and their families. Every year I get letters from students I taught years ago. They tell me about their achievements, their struggles, their families. But the letters that mean the most to me are the ones that say, "Thank you for seeing me when I couldn't see myself." Mrs. Chen unpinned one particular letter and handed it to Marcus. It was from a student named David, now apparently in high school, thanking Mrs. Chen for helping him and his single mother navigate his father's death when he was in 3rd grade. David was angry and acting out when he came to my class, Mrs. Chen explained. His mother was working 2 jobs and felt like she was failing him every day. It took months of after-school sessions, family therapy, and community support. But David learned to process his grief in healthy ways. His mother learned to take care of herself so she could take care of him. She pointed to a phrase in David's letter, "You taught me that needing help isn't weakness, and that love doesn't mean carrying other people's pain." "That's what I want for Emma," Mrs. Chen said, "and for you." Marcus reread the letter, trying to imagine Emma as a teenager, writing to thank the teacher who had changed her trajectory. The possibility felt both hopeful and terrifying. "Mrs. Chen, I need to tell you something," Marcus said, his voice heavy with shame. "Last month, Emma asked me if we could get a dog, just a small one from the shelter, and I snapped at her. Told her we could barely afford to feed ourselves, let alone a pet. She never brought it up again, but I saw her looking at pictures of dogs online afterward." Mrs. Chen nodded knowingly. Emma mentioned the dog conversation. "She told me she realized afterward that she was being selfish, that she needed to think more about our family's money situation." Marcus winced. "That's exactly what I was afraid of. I don't want her to feel like she can't want things, but I also don't know how to explain our financial situation without making her feel insecure." "Emma actually brought the dog idea to me a few weeks later," Mrs. Chen said. She had developed a plan for earning money to buy dog food by doing extra chores and maybe walking neighbors' dogs. She had researched the cost of veterinary care and identified low-cost clinics in the area. She even found information about therapy dogs and how having a pet might help both of you with stress and grief. She pulled out a folder Emma had created, complete with photos of adoptable dogs from the local shelter, a budget breakdown, and a schedule for pet care responsibilities. Emma's plan was actually quite reasonable and well-researched. She'd thought through every detail except one. What was that? She never considered that you might want to be part of the decision. Her plan was designed to add a positive element to your family without requiring anything from you. She was still trying to manage your emotional and financial load rather than sharing a dream with you. Marcus felt his chest tighten as he looked through Emma's meticulous planning. Her writing was careful and hopeful, filled with details about different dog breeds and their temperaments, estimated costs for supplies, and a timeline for gradually introducing a pet into their routine. There's something else, Mrs. Chen said gently. Emma has been volunteering at the animal shelter on Saturday mornings. She told them her father was too busy to bring her, so she walked there by herself. Marcus felt a chill. She's been walking. To the animal shelter alone? It's almost 2 miles from our house. The shelter coordinator called me when they realized Emma was walking such a distance unsupervised. They've been picking her up and dropping her off since then, but Emma made them promise not to tell you because she didn't want to worry you or create another obligation for your schedule. Marcus put his head in his hands, overwhelmed by the pattern of Emma managing her own needs while trying to protect him. She's been creating this whole separate life that I know nothing about. It's not because she wants to exclude you, Mrs. Chen clarified, but because she's learned to include only the parts of herself that don't require anything from you. The Emma you see at home is the edited version, the one designed not to add stress to your life. Mrs. Chen moved to her computer and pulled up a video file. The shelter coordinator sent me this last week. I think you should see it. The video showed Emma in a large room full of dogs sitting on the floor while several animals climbed over her. She was laughing, completely relaxed, talking to the dogs in an animated voice Marcus rarely heard at home. A large golden retriever had settled beside her, and Emma was reading aloud from a children's book while the dog listened attentively. Emma has been reading to the shelter dogs, Mrs. Chen explained. The coordinator says it helps calm the animals and improves Emma's reading confidence. It's a perfect example of Emma's natural ability to nurture others when she feels safe and valued. Marcus watched his daughter on the screen, seeing joy and freedom in her expression that he realized had been missing from their home life. She looks so happy. She is happy there, just like she's happy here in our classroom.
Ow.
These are spaces where Emma feels permission to be herself without managing other people's emotions. Mrs. Chen paused the video on a frame showing Emma hugging the golden retriever. Mr. Thompson, I want to propose something that might sound overwhelming at first, but I think it could transform your relationship with Emma. She turned to face him directly. What if instead of you picking up Emma from school every day, you came early enough to participate in our after-school time? What if you became part of Emma's safe space instead of just the person she protects? Marcus looked surprised. I mean, like do homework together here? I mean, like learning together. Emma could teach you some of the things she's been learning. You could work on projects side by side. You could see firsthand how brilliant and capable she is when she's not worried about your reaction. Mrs. Chen walked to a calendar on the wall. 3 days a week, from 4:30 to 6 o'clock, you and Emma could have structured time together in a neutral space. I would be here to facilitate conversations when needed. But mostly you'd just be spending time together without the pressure of home responsibilities. She pointed to various activities written on the calendar. Monday could be project time, working on Emma's business plan for your shop, or building something together. Wednesday could be reading time. Emma could read to you like she reads to the shelter dogs. Friday could be planning time, talking about dreams, goals, or just fun things you'd like to do as a family. Marcus felt both intrigued and terrified by the proposal. What if Emma doesn't want me in her safe space? What if I say the wrong thing or react badly to something? That's exactly why it would happen here first. In a controlled environment where there's support available, Mrs. Chen explained, Emma wants you in her life, Mr. Thompson. She wants to share her interests and dreams with you, but she needs to know it's safe to do so. Mrs. Chen moved to a whiteboard and began writing. Here's what I think Emma needs most. She needs to see you take care of yourself. She needs permission to have needs and wants. She needs honest conversations about her mother and the accident. She needs to understand that love doesn't require perfection. And she needs to experience unconditional positive attention that isn't tied to her behavior or performance. She turned back to Marcus. And here's what I think you need most. You need to see Emma as she really is, not just as the child you're trying to protect. You need support in processing your own grief, so it doesn't overwhelm Emma. You need practical tools for having difficult conversations. You need to understand that accepting help isn't failing as a father. And you need to experience joy with your daughter again. Marcus stared at the list, feeling as though Mrs. Chen had somehow looked directly into his heart and identified needs he hadn't even acknowledged to himself. "There's one more thing," Mrs. Chen said, her voice gentle but firm. "Emma's birthday is in 6 weeks. She's been planning her own party, a small gathering where she would make dinner for you, invite her shelter dogs via video call, and present you with all the gifts she's been making. She's been saving her lunch money to buy ingredients." Marcus felt tears welling up again. "She's been planning her own birthday party and paying for it herself? Because she's learned that celebrations are work for you rather than joy," Mrs. Chen said. "But what if we changed that? What if we planned a birthday celebration that was truly for Emma, one where she gets to be the center of attention, without worrying about the cost or effort for you?" She handed him a sheet of paper with Emma's dream birthday written at the top, followed by a list in Emma's handwriting. Dogs, stories, dad not worried, cake we make together, friends who know about mom, pictures we can keep forever. Marcus. Read the list through blurred vision, realizing that his daughter's dreams were both heartbreakingly modest and profoundly wise. Marcus sat in silence for several minutes, processing everything Mrs. Chen had shared. The classroom felt different now, not just a place where his daughter received academic instruction, but a sanctuary where she had been rebuilding herself piece by piece. He looked around with new eyes, seeing evidence of Emma's presence everywhere. Her artwork on the walls, her favorite books on the reading table, her handwriting on various projects and displays. "Mrs. Chen," he said finally, "I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me. Do you think I'm a bad father?" Mrs. Chen's response was immediate and firm. "Mr. Thompson, I think you're a father who has been drowning while trying to keep your daughter afloat. I think you're a man who has sacrificed everything for his child's well-being, including his own mental health. I think you're someone who loves so deeply that you've forgotten love includes taking care of yourself." She pulled her chair closer to his. "But I also think you're a father who showed up tonight when your child needed you to hear difficult truths. I think you're a man who's willing to change course when presented with evidence that your current path isn't serving your daughter's best interests. Those aren't the qualities of a bad father, Mr. Thompson. Those are the qualities of a father who's ready to heal." Marcus nodded slowly, feeling something shift inside him. "What would it look like, practically speaking, if I took your suggestion seriously? The therapy, the after-school sessions, all of it?" Mrs. Chen opened her laptop and pulled up a detailed schedule. "I've been hoping you'd ask that question. Here's what I propose for the next 3 months. She showed him a calendar with specific appointments and activities mapped out. Week 1, you and Emma meet with Dr. Martinez together. The focus would be on establishing safety and trust, not diving into trauma immediately. Emma needs to know that seeking help doesn't mean she's broken or that you can't handle her needs." Marcus studied the calendar, noting that Mrs. Chen had already blocked out times that would work with his shop's schedule. "You've really thought this through." Week 2, you start attending the single father support group while Emma participates. In a children's grief group that meets at the same time, you both get to process your experiences with others who understand, but separately, so you can be honest without worrying about protecting each other. She scrolled down to show more detailed planning. Week 3, we begin our after-school sessions together. The first few would be structured activities where Emma gets to teach you things she's learned. This reverses the typical parent-child dynamic and lets Emma experience being the competent one while you practice being the student. Marcus found himself smiling at the idea. Emma would love being the teacher. Exactly. And you'd get to see her confidence and knowledge in action instead of just hearing about it secondhand from me. Mrs. Chen clicked to another section of the calendar. Week 4. We introduce family project time. Emma has been wanting to help with your business, and you could actually benefit from her organizational skills and fresh perspective. She pulled up Emma's detailed business plan again. "Mr. Thompson, your daughter has identified several inefficiencies in your shop's workflow that could genuinely save you time and money. What if instead of protecting her from your work stress, you invited her to be part of the solution?" Marcus looked through Emma's suggestions again, this time from a purely practical standpoint. Her observations about tool organization were spot on, and her ideas for customer service improvements showed a sophisticated understanding of business operations. "She really thinks I could hire an assistant?" he asked. She calculated that the time savings from her organizational improvements, combined with the increased customer satisfaction from her service suggestions, could generate enough additional revenue to justify a part-time employee within 6 months. Mrs. Chen showed him Emma's financial projections, complete with conservative and optimistic scenarios. "Emma has been researching your local competition, analyzing your current customer base, and developing marketing strategies. She's essentially created a business development plan." Marcus shook his head in amazement. "Where did she learn to do this kind of analysis?" "She's been using our computer time to research business management, customer service, and even basic accounting." When other kids were playing games or browsing entertainment sites, Emma was watching YouTube videos about small business success and reading articles about automotive industry trends. Mrs. Chen pulled up Emma's internet search history from the school computers. The list was remarkable: how to help small businesses grow, customer service best practices, automotive industry challenges, 2025, work-life balance for single parents, how to help sad dads feel better. The last search hit Marcus like a physical blow. "She's been researching how to help me feel better. Emma has been treating your emotional well-being as a problem she's responsible for solving," Mrs. Chen said gently. "She's researched everything, from depression symptoms to stress management techniques. She's even looked up information about widowed parents and how children can support them." She showed him some of the articles Emma had bookmarked: "Signs your parent is struggling with grief," "How kids can help overwhelm single parents," "Activities that make sad adults happy again." Marcus felt overwhelmed by the evidence of Emma's concern for him. "She's 8 years old. She shouldn't be worried about my mental health." "No, she shouldn't. But she is, which means we need to address it directly rather than pretending it's not happening." Mrs. Chen closed the laptop and looked at Marcus seriously. "Mr. Thompson, Emma's research led her to some concerning conclusions. She found articles about parents who give up when life gets too hard, and she's developed elaborate plans to prevent that from happening." She pulled out another folder, this one labeled Emma's emergency plans. Inside were detailed instructions Emma had written for various scenarios: what to do if Dad gets too sad to go to work, how to contact Uncle Tom if Dad won't get out of bed, which neighbors might help if Dad can't buy groceries. Marcus read through his daughter's contingency plans with growing horror. "She's been preparing for me to have a breakdown. She's been preparing to take care of you if your current coping strategies fail," Mrs. Chen corrected. "Emma has identified warning signs of depression and developed intervention strategies. It's sophisticated crisis planning that no child should ever have to create." The weight of Emma's unspoken fear settled over Marcus. He realized that, while he'd been working himself to exhaustion to provide for her, she'd been developing backup plans to manage his potential emotional collapse. "There's something else," Mrs. Chen said, her voice even gentler than before. "Emma has been saving money for what she calls Dad's emergency fund. She's been keeping quarters from her lunch money, dollar bills from any gifts, even pennies she finds on the ground." She showed Marcus a small jar Emma kept in her desk, filled with coins and small bills. A handwritten label read for Dad, "If work gets too hard." "She's saved $37 over the past 4 months, Mrs. Chen said. "She told me it's in case you ever can't afford to fix the shop's equipment, or if you need to take a day off when you're too sad to fix cars." Marcus stared at the jar, overwhelmed by the magnitude of responsibility his 8-year-old daughter had assumed. "Mrs. Chen, how do I even begin to undo this? How do I convince her that taking care of me isn't her job?" "By showing her what it looks like when adults take care of themselves and each other," Mrs. Chen replied. "Emma needs to see you accepting help, managing your own emotions, and prioritizing your own well-being. She needs to witness healthy coping strategies in action." Mrs. Chen stood and walked to a flip chart she'd set up in the corner of the room. "I've developed what I call the Emma Plan, a comprehensive approach to helping both of you heal and reconnect." She flipped to the first page, which showed a timeline spanning 6 months. Phase 1. Crisis intervention. This includes immediate therapy for both of you. establishing safety protocols so Emma knows you're getting professional support, and beginning the process of redistributing emotional responsibilities. The chart was incredibly detailed, with specific goals, timelines, and measurable outcomes. Marcus realized that Mrs. Chen had been developing this plan for weeks, possibly months. Phase 2. Skill building. This is where you both learn new ways of communicating, processing emotions, and sharing responsibilities appropriately. Emma learns to be a child again, and you learn to be a parent who models self-care. She flipped to the next page. Phase 3. Family integration. This is where we help you create new traditions, establish healthy boundaries, and build a life together that includes joy, spontaneity, and mutual support without emotional parentification. Marcus studied the plan, feeling both hopeful and overwhelmed. This seems like a lot of work for everyone involved. It is a lot of work, Mrs. Chen agreed. But consider the alternative. Emma is currently on a trajectory toward chronic anxiety, depression, and relationship difficulties in adulthood. She's learning that love means self-sacrifice to the point of self-destruction. If we don't intervene now, these patterns will follow her into every relationship she ever has. She pulled out research articles about children who experience parentification. Adults who are emotionally responsible for their parents as children struggle with boundaries, self-advocacy, and recognizing their own needs. They often end up in relationships where they're caretakers rather than equal partners. Marcus thought about his own relationship with Sarah. How healthy and balanced it had been. How they'd supported each other without either person carrying the full emotional load. I don't want that for Emma. And we need to act now while she's still young enough to learn new patterns. Mrs. Chen flipped to a page labeled Success Indicators. Within 3 months, we should see Emma expressing her own needs without apologizing, asking for help when she needs it, and engaging in age-appropriate activities without worrying about their impact on you. She pointed to another section. Should also see you accepting support from other adults, managing your own emotional needs and interacting with Emma from a place of stability rather than desperation. Mrs. Chen closed the flip chart and returned to her seat. Mr. Thompson, I want to share one more thing with you, and it might be difficult to hear. Marcus braced himself, feeling as though he'd already absorbed more revelations than he could process. Emma has been having nightmares about losing you the way she lost her mother. She's developed elaborate bedtime rituals designed to keep you safe while she sleeps. She checks on you multiple times each night to make sure you're still breathing. Marcus felt his heart break a little more. I had no idea she was doing that. She's very quiet about it, but I've noticed she's often tired in the mornings, in ways that suggest disrupted sleep. When I asked her about her bedtime routine, she described checking all the doors, making sure your keys are in the right place, and listening for your breathing before she can fall asleep. Double quotes. Mrs. Chen leaned forward. Emma is living in a constant state of hypervigilance, always monitoring for signs that another tragedy might occur. This level of chronic stress is impacting her immune system, her concentration, and her ability to engage in normal childhood development. She pulled out a medical journal article about childhood trauma responses. Children who lose one parent often develop what's called magical thinking about their ability to prevent future losses. Emma believes that if she's good enough, vigilant enough, and helpful enough, she can prevent anything bad from happening to you. Marcus thought about Emma's recent behavior, her tendency to wake up early and check on him, her insistence on knowing his work schedule in detail, her panic when he was even slightly late picking her up. How do we help her feel safe again? He asked. By creating predictable routines, consistent emotional support, and a network of trusted adults she knows will take care of both of you, Mrs. Chen replied. Emma needs to see that you have support systems beyond just her. She needs to know that other adults are looking out for your well-being, so she doesn't have to. Mrs. Chen pulled out her phone and showed Marcus a contact list. They have identified several potential support resources, the single fathers group I mentioned, a family friend of yours named Tom, who Emma trusts, 2 neighbors who have offered to help with transportation and meals, and a network of school families who are willing to provide backup support when needed. Marcus looked at the list, surprised to see names of people he'd been too proud or too overwhelmed to ask for help. How did you get all these contacts? Emma talks about the people in her life who make her feel safe. When I realized how isolated you both have become, I reached out to some of these contacts to gauge their willingness to provide support. Every single person I contacted said they'd been wanting to help, but didn't know how to offer without seeming intrusive. Mrs. Chen smiled softly. Mr. Thompson, you and Emma aren't as alone as you think you are. You just haven't known how to accept the help that's available. Marcus looked at the contact list, recognizing names he'd been avoiding for months out of pride and exhaustion. His brother Tom had been calling regularly, offering help with Emma or the business. But Marcus had always deflected with generic reassurances that everything was fine. Mrs. Rodriguez next door had mentioned several times that she was happy to pick up Emma from school if needed, but Marcus had never taken her up on the offer. I've been pushing people away without realizing it, Marcus admitted. I thought I was being independent, but I was actually isolating Emma too. Mrs. Chen nodded. Understandingly, grief has a way of convincing us that accepting help means we're weak or that we're betraying our ability to honor our loved one's memory. But isolation serves no one, least of all Emma. She pulled out a notebook filled with her handwriting. Over the past month, I've had conversations with several people in your support network. Would you like to hear what they shared? Marcus felt nervous but curious. What did they say? Your brother Tom told me he's been worried about you for months but didn't know how to help without seeming like he was judging your parenting. Said he sees how hard you're working, but wishes you'd let him share some of the load. Mrs. Chen. Flip to another page. Mrs. Rodriguez said Emma reminds her of her own daughter at that age, and she'd love to have Emma over for dinner regularly. She's retired, enjoys cooking for others, and has been hoping to develop a friendship with both of you. Marcus thought about Mrs. Rodriguez, a kind woman in her 60s whose children had moved away. He'd always been polite but distant, not wanting to burden her with his family's struggles. Dr. Kim at the auto parts store mentioned that you used to be much more social before Sarah's death. He said you used to talk about Emma's achievements and funny stories, but now you just conduct business and leave. He's been wondering if you'd like to bring Emma by the shop sometime so she can see where you get your parts. Mrs. Chen continued reading from her notes. The principal, Mrs. Thompson, said she's noticed how responsible Emma has become, but also how withdrawn. She'd like to involve Emma in some leadership opportunities that might help her connect with other children, experience being a kid rather than a caretaker. Each revelation hit Marcus differently. He realized that while he'd been focused on surviving day by day, Emma had been missing out on the community connections that might have helped both of them heal. There's something else, Mrs. Chen said, her tone shifting to something more serious. I need to tell you about a conversation Emma had with another student that concerned me enough to document it. She pulled out an incident report form filled with her careful handwriting. 2 weeks ago, Emma's classmate Jennifer was upset because her parents were getting divorced. Jennifer was crying during lunch, and several children were trying to comfort her. Mrs. Chen read from her notes. Jennifer was worried about where she would live and whether her parents would still love her. The other children were offering typical reassurances that divorce doesn't mean parents stop loving their children, that she would still see both parents, that some families just work better apart. Marcus waited, sensing that Emma's response had been different. Emma told Jennifer that sometimes parents die and children have to take care of the parent who's left behind. She said that Jennifer was lucky because divorce meant both parents would still be alive, so Jennifer wouldn't have to worry about keeping them safe. Mrs. Chen looked up from her notes.
Ow!
Then Emma explained to Jennifer that when a parent is very sad, children need to be extra good so the parent doesn't give up. She told Jennifer that if she was helpful enough and didn't cause any problems, her parents might even get back together because they wouldn't have stress from her behavior. Marcus felt sick. She's teaching other children her coping strategies. Emma has developed a framework for understanding family stress that places children at the center of adult emotional well-being, Mrs. Chen explained. She genuinely believes that children's behavior directly controls adult happiness and family stability. She flipped to another section of her notes. When I gently challenged Emma's advice to Jennifer, Emma became defensive. Children who don't take care of their parents are selfish, and that parents who are struggling need their children to be helpers, not problems. Mrs. Chen set down her notebook. Mr. Thompson, Emma has constructed an entire belief system around the idea that she's responsible for your emotional survival. This isn't just affecting her own development, she's now spreading these beliefs to other children, Marcus realized. The implications. She's teaching other kids that they're responsible for their parents' happiness. She's potentially harming them too. Exactly. Which is why intervention is so urgent. Emma's influence on her peers is significant because she's intelligent, articulate, and seen as mature for her age. Other children trust her guidance. Mrs. Chen pulled out her phone and showed Marcus a text conversation with Jennifer's mother. Jennifer went home and told her parents that she needed to be extra good so they wouldn't get divorced. She started refusing playdates and asking to do additional chores. Her parents were confused until Jennifer explained that Emma had taught her how to keep families together. Marcus read the text exchange, watching a domino effect of Emma's distorted beliefs spreading to another family. What did Jennifer's parents do? They contacted me to understand where Jennifer had gotten these ideas. When I explained Emma's situation, they offered to help however they could. Jennifer's father is actually a family therapist who specializes in childhood trauma. Mrs. Chen showed Marcus's Dr. Foster's contact information. Dr. Foster has offered to consult on Emma's case pro bono. He's particularly interested because he sees how Emma's trauma response is affecting the broader classroom community. Marcus felt overwhelmed by the expanding network of people who wanted to help, contrasted against his months of trying to handle everything alone. There's more, Mrs. Chen continued. Emma has been appointed as the unofficial helper for several classmates who are dealing with family stress. Children naturally gravitate toward her because she seems so mature and capable. But she's taking on emotional responsibility for multiple families. She showed Marcus a chart tracking Emma's interactions with classmates. Emma spends her recess time counseling other children rather than playing. She's developed a reputation as the kid who knows about sad families and children seek her out. When they're struggling, Marcus studied the charts, seeing how Emma had essentially become a peer counselor for 80-year-olds dealing with various family challenges. This can't be healthy for her social development. It's preventing her from forming normal childhood friendships, Mrs. Chen confirmed. Emma's relationships with other children are based on her caretaking role rather than mutual enjoyment and shared interests. She pulled out photos from recent classroom activities. In group shots, Emma was often positioned slightly apart from other children, watching them play rather than participating. In individual photos, she looked serious and alert, like she was monitoring the room for problems that might need her intervention. Emma has become hypervigilant about other people's emotional states, Mrs. Chen explained. She notices when classmates are sad, stressed, or struggling before I do. But instead of alerting an adult, she tries to fix the problems herself. Mrs. Chen showed Marcus Emma's school journal, where she'd been tracking other students' family situations. Emma had noted which classmates had parents going through divorce, which ones had family financial stress, and which ones seemed sad or worried. She's created detailed intervention plans for helping her classmates, Mrs. Chen said, showing Marcus pages of Emma's strategies for cheering up sad children, helping stressed families, and preventing various types of family problems. Marcus read through Emma's notes, amazed by her compassion, but horrified by the responsibility she'd assumed. She's trying to save everyone, because she believes that's what love looks like, Mrs. Chen said. Emma has learned that caring means taking responsibility for other people's pain and working to prevent their suffering, even at the cost of her own needs and development. Mrs. Chen walked to the window and looked out at the parking lot where Emma waited in Marcus's truck. Mr. Thompson, I want you to understand something important. Emma's behavior isn't abnormal given what she's experienced. Children who lose a parent often develop these kinds of protective strategies. The problem is that, without intervention, these strategies become fixed patterns that follow them into adulthood. She returned to her desk and pulled out a thick research file. Adults who were parentified as children often struggle with setting boundaries, recognizing their own needs, and maintaining healthy relationships. They frequently end up in careers where they're caretakers, teachers, social workers, therapists, but they struggle to receive care themselves. Marcus looked through the research, seeing patterns described that reminded him uncomfortably of his own tendencies to fix everyone else's problems while neglecting his own needs. The goal isn't to eliminate Emma's compassion or her desire to help others, Mrs. Chen clarified. The goal is to help her understand appropriate boundaries and appropriate ways of showing care. She showed Marcus a curriculum she'd developed, specifically for Emma. We're going to teach Emma the difference between helping and taking responsibility. She's going to learn that she can care about someone without being responsible for their emotional well-being. The curriculum included role-playing exercises, boundary-setting activities, and lessons about different types of support. Emma will practice saying things like "that sounds really hard" instead of "what can I do to fix it?" She learned to offer comfort without taking on responsibility for solutions. Mrs. Chen pulled out a calendar showing the next 6 weeks of planned activities. We're also going to help Emma experience receiving care without having to earn it. She's going to practice asking for help, expressing preferences, and taking up space without apologizing. Marcus studied the detailed plan, feeling both hopeful and guilty about how much work Mrs. Chen had put into helping his daughter. "Mrs. Chen, I have to ask again. Why are you doing all this? This is far beyond what any teacher should have to take on." Mrs. Chen was quiet for a long moment, then pulled out the old photo of herself with Mrs. Patterson again. "Mr. Thompson, when I was Emma's age, Mrs. Patterson didn't just teach me English. She taught me that I was worthy of care, that my needs mattered, and that love didn't require perfect performance." She traced the edge of the photo with her finger. "Mrs. Patterson stayed after school with me for 2 years. She bought me books, helped me with homework, and even attended my high school graduation. She invested in me when my own parents couldn't, and that investment changed the trajectory of my entire life." Mrs. Chen looked up at Marcus with tears in her eyes. "I became a teacher because of Mrs. Patterson. I stay late with Emma because someone stayed late with me. I research resources and develop intervention plans because someone saw potential in me when I couldn't see it myself." She stood and walked to a bulletin board covered with photos of her former students at various life milestones, graduations, weddings, career achievements. "Every year I get updates from students I taught years ago. They tell me about their successes, their families, their careers. But the letters that mean the most are the ones that say, 'Thank you for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself.'" Marcus looked at the photos, seeing evidence of lives changed by Mrs. Chen's dedication. "You've saved a lot of children." "Mrs. Patterson saved me first," Mrs. Chen replied. "Now I get to pay that gift forward." "Emma reminds me so much of myself at that age. Brilliant, compassionate, carrying weight that no child should carry. If I can help Emma learn healthy patterns now, she might become the kind of adult who helps other children heal." She returned to her seat, her expression determined. "Mr. Thompson, Emma has the potential to become an extraordinary teacher, therapist, or leader precisely because of her sensitivity and compassion. But she needs to learn that caring for others starts with caring for herself." Mrs. Chen pulled out Emma's business plan again. "Look at this project she created for your shop. Emma's natural leadership abilities and problem-solving skills are remarkable. But she's applying them to adult responsibilities instead of appropriate challenges." She pointed to various sections of Emma's work. "What if we channeled these abilities toward appropriate goals? What if Emma used her organizational skills to help plan school events? What if she used her compassion to develop programs for helping shelter animals? What if she used her research abilities to explore her own interests instead of fixing family problems?" Marcus began to see the possibilities. She could still be helpful and caring, but in ways that build her own skills instead of managing adult responsibilities. Exactly. Emma needs opportunities to experience competence and contribution without carrying emotional burden. She needs to learn that her value doesn't depend on how much she can help others. As the conversation deepened, Marcus found himself looking at the clock and realizing they'd been talking for over 2 hours. Emma had been waiting patiently in his truck all this time, probably reading one of her books or working on another project. Finally learned who she really was, felt symbolic of their entire relationship. "Mrs. Chen, I think I need to go check on Emma," Marcus said, starting to stand. "Actually, Mr. Thompson, I have a confession to make," Mrs. Chen said with a small smile. "Emma isn't in your truck." Marcus froze. "What do you mean she isn't in My truck. About an hour ago, I texted my colleague Mrs. Anderson, who runs the after-school art program. Emma's in the art room working on a special project while we talk. I wanted to make sure you could focus on our conversation without worrying about her waiting. Marcus felt a mixture of relief and surprise. Emma agreed to this, I told her. That you and I needed to have an important conversation about helping her succeed in school, and that Mrs. Anderson had a project that might interest her. Emma was actually excited about the opportunity to work in the art room after hours. Mrs. Chen stood and gestured toward the door. Would you like to see what she's working on? I think it might give you some insight into how Emma processes her emotions when she feels completely safe. They walked down the hallway to the art room, where Marcus could see Emma through the window. She was completely absorbed in painting a large canvas, her whole body engaged in the creative process. Her hair was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She had paint smudges on her clothes and face, and she was humming softly to herself. I've never seen her look so relaxed, Marcus whispered. This is Emma, when she's not managing anyone else's emotions. Mrs. Chen replied quietly. This is who she is when she feels permission to just exist. They watched as Emma stepped back from her painting, studied it critically, then added a few more careful brushstrokes. The painting appeared to be a landscape with figures, but Marcus couldn't make out the details from their vantage point. Emma has been working on this painting for 3 weeks, Mrs. Chen explained. She asked if she could create something special for your home, something that would make you feel happy when you looked at it. Marcus felt his throat tighten. Can we go in? Mrs. Chen knocked softly before opening the door. Emma looked up with paint-covered hands and a genuine smile, the first truly carefree expression Marcus had seen from his daughter in months. Dad, you have to see what I'm making, Emma said, her voice bright with excitement. Mrs. Anderson taught me about perspective and color mixing, and I think I'm getting really good at it. Marcus approached the easel, and what he saw took his breath away. Emma had painted a detailed scene of their backyard, but not as it currently existed. Instead, she'd painted it as a place of joy and activity. There was a garden with vegetables and flowers, a small workshop area where figures that looked like Marcus and Emma worked on projects together. In a corner with what appeared to be a doghouse and a golden retriever. Emma, this is incredible, Marcus said, studying the careful details. When did you learn to paint like this? Mrs. Anderson has been teaching me during lunch sometimes, Emma explained. She said I have a good eye for composition, whatever that means.
Out!
But mostly I just painted things that would make our house feel happy. Marcus noticed that in the painting both figures looked relaxed and joyful. They were working together on what appeared to be building a small greenhouse. Their tools organized efficiently, but not obsessively. Their expressions focused but peaceful. Tell me about this scene, Marcus said. Sitting down at Emma's eye level, Emma's face lit up as she began describing her vision. Well, in this part, we're building a greenhouse so we can grow vegetables year-round. I researched it, and it could save us money on groceries and give us a project to work on together. She pointed to different areas of the painting. And over here is where we could keep Buddy. That's what I named the dog we might get someday. He's a golden retriever because they're good with kids and they don't shed too much. Marcus noticed that Emma talked about these dreams without the careful monitoring of his reaction that had become so familiar. In the art room, surrounded by creative materials and Mrs. Anderson's encouraging presence, Emma felt free to express hopes without worrying about their practicality or impact on his stress level. And this part here is my favorite, Emma continued, pointing to a corner of the painting where the two figures sat together on a bench. We're reading together, but not homework reading, just fun reading where we take turns and do different voices for the characters. Mrs. Anderson approached with a warm smile. Emma has been describing this painting to me as we work. She calls it our someday house, not because she doesn't like your current house, but because she imagines ways it could become even more special. Marcus studied the painting more carefully, seeing details he'd missed initially. Painted wind chimes hanging from trees, bird feeders attracting colorful birds, and flower boxes under windows. She'd even included a small fire pit where painted figures roasted marshmallows under a starry sky. Emma, how long have you been thinking about these ideas? Marcus asked. Since Mom went to heaven, Emma said matter-of-factly. At first, I just thought about things that might make you less sad. But then I started thinking about things that might make us both happy. She cleaned her brush thoughtfully. Mrs. Anderson helped me understand the difference. Making someone less sad is about fixing problems, but making someone happy is about creating good things together. Marcus looked at Mrs. Anderson gratefully, realizing that Emma had been receiving guidance from multiple caring adults who were helping her develop healthier perspectives. The greenhouse idea came from my research about your business, Emma continued. I thought if we could save money on groceries and maybe sell some extra vegetables, it might help with the shop's budget. But then Mrs. Anderson asked me what I would want if money wasn't a problem, and I realized I just wanted us to have fun projects to do together. Mrs. Chen joined the conversation. Emma has been learning to separate problem-solving from dream-sharing. She's practicing expressing wants and interests that aren't tied to fixing family challenges. Emma nodded enthusiastically. Mrs. Anderson taught me that dreams don't have to be practical to be important, she said. Imagining good things is how people plan for happiness. Marcus felt emotion welling up as he realized how many caring adults had been working together to support his daughter's emotional development. Emma, I love this painting. I love all the ideas in it. But most of all, I love seeing you excited about something you created just because you wanted to. Emma beamed, then looked suddenly serious. Dad. Do you think any of these things could really happen someday? Not because we need them to solve problems, but just because they might be. Fun? The question hung in the air, loaded with hope and vulnerability. Marcus realized this was a pivotal moment. Emma was asking for permission to dream without justification, to want things simply because she wanted them. Emma, I think we could definitely explore some of these ideas together, Marcus said carefully. Not because we have to, but because they sound like they would make us both happy. Emma's face transformed with joy, and she impulsively hugged Marcus, getting paint on his work shirt. For the first time in months, Marcus didn't worry about the stain or the practicality of dry cleaning costs. He just held his daughter and felt her excitement. There's something else I want to show you, Emma said, pulling away and leading him to another easel. This one isn't finished yet, but Mrs. Anderson said it's okay to show work in progress. The second painting was smaller but more complex. It showed the interior of what appeared to be Marcus's auto shop, but transformed. The space was organized and efficient like Emma's business plan suggested, but it also looked welcoming and comfortable. There was a small area with chairs and a coffee table where customers could wait, walls decorated with photos and artwork, and a corner where Emma sat reading while Marcus worked nearby. I've been painting different ways the shop could feel more like home, Emma explained. Not because there's anything wrong with it now, because I love being there with you, and I wanted to imagine ways it could be even better. Marcus studied the painting, seeing his workspace through his daughter's loving eyes. Emma had captured details he'd never noticed, the way afternoon light came through the windows, the orderly arrangement of tools that represented his skill and dedication, the sense of purpose and competence that defined his work life. In this painting, you look proud of what you do, Mrs. Anderson observed. Emma spent a lot of time getting your expression just right. She wanted to show how she sees you when you're working. Marcus looked more closely at the painted version of himself. Emma had portrayed him as confident and skilled, focused but relaxed, clearly in his element. It was a version of himself he'd lost sight of during the months of financial stress and emotional overwhelm. Is this really how you see me when I'm working? Marcus asked Emma. You're amazing when you fix cars, Emma said earnestly. Exactly what's wrong, just by listening to the engine, can make broken things work perfectly again. You're like a doctor for cars, and you're really, really good at it. Marcus felt tears threatening again, realizing that while he'd been focused on his struggles and limitations, Emma had been seeing his competence and expertise. Mrs. Anderson helped me understand that people can be good at things even when they're sad about other things, Emma continued. She said you being sad about Mom doesn't mean you're not still the best car mechanic in town. Mrs. Anderson nodded. Emma has been working through some complex ideas about how people can hold multiple feelings at the same time. She's learning that you can miss someone and still enjoy your work, or feel stressed about money and still be proud of your skills. Marcus looked between the two paintings, one showing dreams for their home life, the other celebrating his professional abilities. Together, they represented a vision of wholeness that he hadn't imagined possible. "Emma, these paintings show me that you've been thinking about our life in ways I never realized," Marcus said. "You've been seeing possibilities I couldn't see." Emma nodded eagerly. "That's what Mrs. Anderson calls visioning," she said. "It's different from worrying because visioning is about creating good things instead of preventing bad things." Mrs. Chen stepped forward. "Mr. Thompson, this is what I've been trying to show you. Emma has remarkable emotional intelligence and creative, problem-solving abilities. But she's been applying these gifts to adult responsibilities instead of age-appropriate exploration." She gestured toward the paintings. "This is what happens when Emma feels safe to dream and create without the pressure of solving family problems. This is her natural creativity and optimism when it's not constrained by worry." Marcus looked at his daughter's artwork with new understanding. "Emma, I want you to know that I love these ideas. I love seeing how you imagine our life together. I want us to start making some of these dreams real." Emma's eyes widened with surprise and delight. "Really? Even if they're not practical? Or necessary? Especially because they're about joy and togetherness," Marcus replied. "I think we both need more dreams and less worry in our lives." Emma clapped her hands together, leaving small paint prints. "Can we start with the reading together part? That one doesn't cost any money, and I have lots of good books we could share." Marcus smiled, feeling lighter than he had in months. "I think that sounds like the perfect place to start." Mrs. Anderson began cleaning brushes while Mrs. Chen gathered some papers. "Mr. Thompson, what you've witnessed tonight is Emma's authentic self when she feels genuinely supported and free to express her inner world." Marcus watched Emma carefully covering her paintings to protect them while they dried. "How do I help her feel free at home?" "By continuing the work we've outlined tonight," Mrs. Chen replied. "By getting support for yourself so Emma doesn't feel responsible for your well-being. By creating space for dreams and creativity alongside practical responsibilities. By showing her that love includes joy, not just survival." Emma finished securing her artwork and turned to Marcus with a shy smile. "Dad, would it be okay if we went home and started reading together tonight? I have a book about a girl who builds a robot, and I think you might like it." Marcus looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw not the careful caretaker he'd been living with, but the creative, hopeful, brilliant child she truly was. "Emma, I can't think of anything I'd rather do." 3 weeks after that, transformative evening in Mrs. Chen's classroom, Sfountas found himself sitting in Dr. Martinez's office with Emma beside him. The family therapy sessions had begun tentatively, with Emma initially worried that needing therapy meant she was broken or that Marcus was giving up on handling things himself. But Dr. Martinez had quickly established that therapy was a tool for making good families even stronger, not a last resort for failing ones. "Emma, I'd like you to tell your dad about the conversation we had last week regarding worry responsibilities," Dr. Martinez said, her voice gentle but encouraging. Emma shifted in her chair, glancing at Marcus before speaking. "Dr. Martinez helped me understand that worries have owners," she said carefully. "Like Dad's work, worries belong to Dad, and my school worries belong to me. When I try to fix Dad's work worries, I'm taking something that isn't mine." Marcus felt a familiar tightening in his chest, still adjusting to these direct conversations about their family dynamics. "And how does that feel when we talk about it that way?" "Weird," Emma admitted honestly, "because I'm really good at solving problems. And it feels wrong not to help when I can see what needs to be fixed." Dr. Martinez leaned forward. "Emma, can you explain to your dad what we discovered about the difference between helping and taking responsibility?" Emma brightened, clearly more comfortable with this topic. "Helping is when someone asks for specific help, like can you hand me that tool? Or will you read this with me? Taking responsibility is when I try to fix things nobody asked me to fix, like Dad's sadness about Mom or the shop's money problems." Marcus watched his daughter articulate concepts that had taken him weeks to understand. "That makes sense? Can you give me an example of how that might work at home?" "Well," Emma said thoughtfully, instead of staying awake to make sure you're okay. I could ask if you want to talk about your day. And instead of hiding when I'm scared of the dark, I could tell you I need a nightlight. The simplicity of the distinction hit Marcus powerfully. Emma was learning to offer connection rather than management, to express needs rather than suppress them. Emma has been practicing asking for what she needs this week, Dr. Martinez said. Would you like to share what happened with the nightlight request? Emma looked pleased. I told Dad I was scared of the dark, and instead of saying I was being a baby or that we couldn't afford it, he bought me a really pretty one that looks like stars on the ceiling, and he said he was proud of me for telling him something important. Marcus remembered that moment vividly. Emma's tentative admission that she'd been afraid at night for months, followed by his realization that a $15 nightlight could address a fear his daughter had been managing alone. Significant not because of the cost, but because it represented Emma's first direct request for comfort in months. Dr. Martinez, I want to share something that happened yesterday, Marcus said. Emma asked me a question I've never heard from her before. Dr. Martinez nodded encouragingly. She asked me, Dad, what do you want for dinner tonight? Should I make, or what do we have ingredients for? But what I actually wanted. Marcus paused, remembering his surprise at the question. I realized she'd never asked me about my preferences before, only about practical constraints, Emma added. Dr. Martinez taught me that people can want things just because they want them, not because they need them or because they solve problems. So I asked Dad what he wanted, and he said tacos, so we made tacos together. And how did that feel different from your usual dinner routine? Dr. Martinez asked. More fun, Emma said immediately. Because we were making something we wanted instead of something we had to eat. Dad told me funny stories about when he was learning to cook. I told him about the cooking videos I watch on the computer at school. Marcus smiled, remembering how natural the conversation had felt once they'd moved beyond logistics into personal sharing. It was the first time in months that dinner felt like something to enjoy rather than just another task to complete. Martinez made notes before continuing. Emma, last week you mentioned that you've been having different kinds of dreams since we started our sessions. Can you tell your dad about those? Emma's expression grew thoughtful. Before, I mostly had dreams about bad things happening, Dad getting hurt, or forgetting to feed me, or the house catching fire. But now I have dreams about good things we might do together. She turned to Marcus. Last night I dreamed we went to the shelter and picked out a dog together and you were laughing when the dog licked your face. In the dream, you weren't worried about money or time or anything. You just liked the dog. Marcus felt emotion rise in his throat. Emma, I want you to know that I would love to visit the shelter with you, even if we're not ready to adopt a dog yet. Just to see the animals and spend time together. Emma's eyes widened with surprise and delight. Really? Even if it doesn't solve any problems or help with anything practical? Especially because it would just be fun, Marcus confirmed, echoing. The language Dr. Martinez had been teaching them about the value of joy for its own sake. Dr. Martinez smiled at their exchange. This is exactly the kind of shift we've been working toward. Emma is learning to dream and express desires without justification. And Marcus is learning to value experiences that nurture their relationship rather than just their survival. Ashi pulled out a folder containing both of their individual work from the past weeks. They want to share some observations about the progress you've both made, but also talk about some challenges that are coming up. Dr. Martinez showed them charts, tracking Emma's anxiety levels and sleep patterns. Emma, your nighttime anxiety has decreased significantly since you started expressing your fears directly, and since your dad began attending his support group. Can you tell him why you think that's connected? Emma considered the question seriously. When Dad talks to other dads about his sadness, I don't have to worry about being the only person who knows he's sad. It's like having backup helpers, so I don't have to do all the helping myself. Marcus nodded, thinking about his weekly attendance at the single father's support group. Initially, he'd been reluctant to share personal details with strangers, but hearing other men's similar struggles had been profoundly normalizing and supportive. The other dads understand things that nobody else understands, Marcus added. Like how guilty you feel when your child is happier with other people than with you, or how exhausting it is to make every decision alone. Dr. Martinez turned to a different section of her notes. Marcus, You mentioned that some of Emma's teachers have noticed changes in her classroom behavior. Can you share what Mrs. Chen told you? Marcus felt pride mixed with lingering concern. Mrs. Chen said Emma has started asking questions in class instead of pretending to understand everything. She's also begun participating in group activities, rather than trying to manage other children's problems. Emma added, I'm learning that helping classmates means encouraging them to ask the teacher for help, not trying to solve their problems myself. Mrs. Chen taught me phrases like that sounds hard. Maybe we should tell an adult instead of here's how to fix it. Dr. Martinez nodded approvingly. Emma, how does it feel to focus on your own learning instead of managing other people's problems? Scary but good, Emma said honestly. Sometimes I still notice when other kids are sad and I want to fix everything for them. But Mrs. Chen reminds me that caring about someone doesn't mean I have to carry their feelings. Marcus watched his daughter navigate these complex emotional concepts with increasing confidence. The change in her demeanor over just 3 weeks had been remarkable. She seemed lighter, more playful, more willing to express uncertainty or confusion. There's something else we need to discuss, Dr. Martinez said, her tone becoming more serious. Emma, you've been doing excellent work in learning to set boundaries and express your needs. But we haven't yet addressed the most difficult topic we identified in our assessment. Emma looked nervous, glancing at Marcus for reassurance. Emma still carries significant guilt about her mother's accident, Dr. Martinez explained to Marcus. We've touched on this topic briefly, but Emma hasn't been ready to explore it fully until now. Marcus felt his stomach clench, knowing this conversation had been inevitable, but dreading its difficulty. Emma, last week you told me you were ready to talk with your dad about the day your mom had her accident. Are you still feeling ready for that conversation? Emma nodded solemnly, her expression more serious than Marcus had seen in weeks. Dad, Emma said quietly, I need to tell you something I've been scared to say. I think Mom died because I got sick that week and she had to take me to the doctor. Marcus felt his heart break, realizing that despite all their progress, Emma had been carrying this devastating belief throughout their healing process. Emma, sweetheart, your mother's accident was not your fault, Marcus said immediately, moving closer to her chair. Not in any way. Not even a little bit. But if I hadn't gotten sick, she wouldn't have been driving on that road, Emma insisted, tears beginning to flow. She was coming home from my doctor's appointment when the drunk driver hit her car. Dr. Martinez handed Emma tissues while maintaining steady eye contact. Emma, can you tell me what you think would have happened if you hadn't gotten sick that week? Emma wiped her eyes before answering. Mom would have stayed home that day, and she would still be alive. And do you remember what your mom was doing? The week before you got sick? Dr. Martinez asked gently. Emma thought for a moment. She went to the grocery store, and to pick up her medicine from the pharmacy, and to take our neighbor's mail to her because she was out of town. So your mom drove on various roads for different reasons throughout. Every week, Dr. Martinez observed. The drunk driver who caused the accident was also driving that day on that road at that time. If your mom hadn't been there at that exact moment, the drunk driver might have hit someone else's car. Emma looked confused, as though she'd never considered this perspective. Marcus leaned forward, his voice gentle but firm. Emma, that drunk driver made a choice to drive when he shouldn't have. That's what caused the accident. Not your doctor's appointment, not your illness, not anything you did or needed. But if I had been a better kid and not gotten sick, Emma started. Emma, Dr. Martinez interrupted kindly. 8-year-old children get sick sometimes. It's completely normal and not something you can control. Getting sick doesn't make you a bad kid or a burden. She pulled out a timeline they'd been working on in individual sessions. Emma, I want you to look at this timeline of that week and tell me all the decisions that led to the accident. Emma studied the timeline, which showed the drunk drivers activities that day alongside her family's normal routine.
Ow!
The drunk driver chose to drink alcohol. He chose to drive his car anyway. He chose not to call someone for a ride. And what choices did you make that week? Dr. Martinez asked Emma. Considered this carefully. I told Mom my throat hurt when she asked how I felt. I went to the doctor when she took me. I stayed home from school when she said I should. Those all sound like normal, healthy choices for a child who wasn't feeling well, Dr. Martinez observed. Do any of those choices seem wrong or dangerous to you now? Emma shook her head slowly, beginning to see the distinction Dr. Martinez was helping her recognize. Marcus felt clarity emerging from months of confusion. Emma, I want you to understand something important. Your mom loved taking care of you. When you were sick, she never ever felt burdened by your needs. Taking you to the doctor was something she wanted to do because she loved you. Emma looked up at him with tears still flowing. Are you sure? She didn't die because I needed too much? I'm absolutely sure, Marcus said firmly. Your mom died because someone else made a terrible, dangerous choice. You needed normal kid things, and Mom was happy to provide them, Dr. Martinez added. Emma, needing medical care when you're sick is not just normal. It's important for staying healthy. Your mom was being a good parent by taking you to the doctor. Emma sat quietly for several minutes, processing this reframing of events she'd been carrying guilt about for 2 years. Dr. Martinez, Emma said finally, if it wasn't my fault Mom died, then does that mean I don't have to be perfect to keep Dad safe? The question hung in the air, revealing the connection between Emma's guilt about the past and her hypervigilance about the future. That's exactly what it means, Dr. Martinez confirmed. Bad things sometimes happen to good people, even when everyone makes good choices. You can't prevent all bad things by being perfect. Marcus reached for Emma's hand. I want you to know that I'm going to be okay whether you're perfect or not. I'm getting help from Dr. Martinez and from the other dads in my group. I'm learning to take care of myself so you don't have to take care of me. Emma squeezed his hand, her expression showing the first glimpse of real relief Marcus had seen. From her in months, 1 year after that life-changing evening in Mrs. Chen's classroom, Marcus found himself standing before a room full of single parents at the community center, preparing to share his story for the first time. The monthly support group had become a cornerstone of his healing journey, but tonight was different. Tonight, he was the featured speaker for their annual Stories of Hope event, where families who had successfully navigated crisis shared their experiences with newcomers. Emma sat in the front row, her confidence evident as she smiled encouragingly. At her father, beside her sat Mrs. Chen, Dr. Martinez, and several members of their extended support network. The sight of his chosen family gathered together still filled Marcus with gratitude that sometimes overwhelmed him. A year and a half ago, I thought being a good father meant carrying all the weight myself. Marcus began, his voice steady despite the emotion in his chest. I thought protecting my daughter meant hiding my own struggles, solving every problem, alone, and never letting her see me as anything less than completely in control. He looked at Emma, who nodded encouragingly. They had practiced this presentation together, with Emma insisting that their story could help other families avoid the months of unnecessary suffering they had endured. What I didn't realize was that my 8-year-old daughter had appointed herself as my emotional caretaker. While I was working myself to exhaustion to provide for her physical needs, she was working herself to exhaustion trying to manage my emotional needs. Marcus pulled out his phone and showed the audience a photo from 18 months earlier, himself and Emma at a school event, both looking tired and strained despite their forced smiles. This was us before we learned the difference between love and survival. Emma looks like a miniature adult and I look like someone barely hanging on, because that's exactly what we were. He clicked the next photo, taken just last week during their greenhouse harvest. Both father and daughter were covered in dirt, laughing genuinely as they held up enormous tomatoes, with Buddy photobombing the picture by sticking his nose into the frame. This is us now. Emma looks like a kid who's allowed to be messy and silly. I look like a father who remembers that parenting can include joy, not just responsibility. A woman in the audience raised her hand. What was the turning point? For you, when did you realize things needed to change? Marcus smiled, remembering that pivotal conversation. My daughter's teacher asked me why she stayed late every day with Emma. I thought she was going to tell me about academic problems, but instead, she told me about emotional problems I had no idea existed. He described Mrs. Chen's patient revelation of Emma's anxiety, her misplaced guilt about her mother's death, and her elaborate plans for managing his potential breakdown. As he spoke, he watched several parents in the audience exchange knowing looks, recognizing their own family dynamics. In his story, the hardest part wasn't learning that my daughter was struggling, Marcus continued. The hardest part was accepting that my approach to helping her was actually making things worse. I thought protecting her from my grief was loving her, but I was actually teaching her that love means suffering in silence. Emma stood up from her seat, having requested permission to add her own perspective to tonight's presentation. Can I tell them what it felt like from my side? Marcus nodded, still amazed by his daughter's willingness to share vulnerable experiences if it might help others. When my mom died, I decided that my job was to make sure nothing bad ever happened to my dad, Emma said, her voice clear and confident. I thought that if I was good enough, helpful enough, and quiet enough about my own needs, I could prevent him from being too sad or too tired or too stressed. She looked around the room, making eye contact with several children who had accompanied their parents to the meeting, but that's not a kid's job. Kids are supposed to learn and play and make mistakes and ask for help. When we try to take care of our parents' feelings, we don't get to practice being kids. A teenage boy in the audience spoke up. How did you learn to stop doing that? I feel like if I don't help my mom with everything, she'll fall apart. Emma's response was immediate and compassionate. I learned that helping my dad meant letting other adults help him too. When he started going to therapy and talking to other dads, I didn't have to be his only support person anymore. Marcus felt pride swell as he watched Emma articulate concepts that had taken him months to understand. Emma learned that caring about someone doesn't mean carrying their emotional burdens. She learned to offer connection instead of management. He described their weekly family therapy sessions where they had practiced new ways of communicating and supporting each other. Dr. Martinez taught us that families heal together. Emma couldn't get healthy while I was still struggling, and I couldn't get healthy while Emma was carrying responsibilities that belonged to me. A single mother raised her hand. What does that look like practically? How do you share burdens? Appropriately with children? Marcus had anticipated this question, knowing it was the most common concern among overwhelmed single parents. Emma and I developed what we call age-appropriate helping. She contributes to our family through tasks that build her skills and confidence, not through managing my emotional state. Emma jumped in again. I help with cooking, gardening, organizing our home, and taking care of Buddy. Those are jobs that teach me things and make me feel useful. But I don't help with Dad's work stress, money worries, or sadness about Mom. Those are grown-up problems that need grown-up solutions. Marcus clicked another photo showing Emma working in their greenhouse. Dirt under her fingernails and a look of pure concentration as she transplanted seedlings. Emma is incredibly helpful and capable, but now her contributions strengthen her sense of competence instead of draining her emotional resources. He showed another image of Emma reading to children at the animal shelter, surrounded by attentive dogs and cats. She channels her natural caregiving instincts into a age-appropriate service. She's learning that helping others can be joyful and energizing when it's chosen rather than obligated. A father near the back of the room spoke up. My son has started having nightmares and checking on me during the night. How do I help him feel safe without making him feel like his fears are silly? Emma and Marcus exchanged a look, remembering Emma's own nighttime vigilance and the patient work required to address it. I used to check on my dad multiple times every night, Emma shared. I was scared that something might happen to him while I was sleeping, like what happened to my mom. Marcus took over the explanation. We addressed Emma's nighttime anxiety by creating predictable routines and clear communication about safety. But most importantly, we addressed the root cause. Emma's fear that she was responsible for preventing tragedy. He described the process of helping Emma understand that her mother's death was caused by someone else's poor choices. It's not by Emma's normal childhood needs. Children often develop magical thinking about their ability to control outcomes. Emma needed to learn that being good couldn't prevent bad things from happening, but that support systems could help us handle whatever did happen. Emma nodded. Dr. Martinez taught me that feeling safe isn't about controlling everything. It's about knowing that there are lots of adults who will take care of me and Dad no matter what happens. Marcus clicked a photo of their extended support network, gathered for Emma's 9th birthday celebration. Family, friends, neighbors, Mrs. Chen, Dr. Martinez, and members of their single parents group, all surrounding a beaming Emma as she blew out her candles. "This is what safety looks like for us now," Marcus said. "Emma knows that she's part of a community, not just dependent on one person. If something happened to me, she has multiple adults who love her and would step in." That knowledge freed her from feeling like she had to protect me. A woman near the front raised her hand. "How long did this process take?" "I'm feeling hopeful but also overwhelmed by how much work it sounds like." Marcus considered the question carefully. The crisis intervention happened quickly within the first month. We had therapy appointments, support group connections, and safety plans in place. But the deeper healing took about 6 months of consistent work, Emma added, and we're still learning new things. Like last month, I caught myself trying to cheer Dad up when he was sad about missing Mom, but now I know how to just tell him. I notice he's sad and ask if he wants to talk instead of trying to fix his feelings. Marcus felt moved by Emma's continued growth and self-awareness. The difference is that now Emma responds to my emotions with appropriate concern rather than inappropriate responsibility. She can care about my feelings without feeling obligated to change them. Showed a recent photo of himself crying while looking through old pictures of Sarah, with Emma sitting beside him, offering tissues and quiet companionship rather than frantically trying to cheer him up. "This is what healthy support looks like," Marcus explained. "Emma can witness my grief without feeling responsible for fixing it. I can be authentically human without worrying that my emotions are damaging her." A teenage girl in the audience spoke up. "My mom always tells me I'm so mature for my age, like it's a compliment. But sometimes I don't want to be mature. I want to be silly and mess up without it being a big deal." Emma's response was immediate and empathetic. "People used to say that about me too, and I thought it meant I was doing a good job. But Mrs. Chen taught me that kids who are mature for their age are usually kids who haven't gotten to be kids." Marcus nodded. Emma's maturity was actually a symptom of her trauma, not a strength to celebrate. She needed permission to be age appropriately immature sometimes. He showed a video on his phone of Emma and her friends having a silly dance party in their living room, with Emma laughing hysterically as she attempted ridiculous moves. This is Emma being appropriately 9 years old. She's learned that she can be responsible when needed and playful when possible. As the evening continued, Marcus and Emma answered questions about practical strategies, resource recommendations, and ongoing challenges. They discussed the importance of professional support, the value of community connections, and the gradual process of rebuilding trust after trauma. "The most important thing we learned," Marcus concluded, "is that love doesn't mean protecting each other from all difficult emotions. Love means creating safety to experience the full range of human feelings together." Emma stood up for her final contribution. "And kids, if you're listening, your parents' feelings are not your job to fix. Your job is to be a kid, learn things, make mistakes, and let the adults in your life take care of the adult problems." As the formal presentation ended and people began moving toward the reception area, Marcus was approached by a father whose story sounded remarkably similar to his own 18 months earlier. "My daughter has been having panic attacks at school, but she insists everything is fine at home. After hearing your story, I'm wondering if I've been missing something important." Marcus exchanged contact information with the father, agreeing to connect him with Dr. Martinez and Mrs. Chen. These conversations had become a regular part of his healing journey, the opportunity to help other families avoid the months of suffering his family had endured. Emma was surrounded by children, asking questions about her artwork, her greenhouse, and her experience with therapy. Marcus watched her offer encouragement and practical advice with the same compassion she'd always shown. But now, from a place of strength rather than depletion, Mrs. Chen approached Marcus with tears in her eyes. 2 years ago, when Emma first entered my classroom, I never could have imagined her speaking so confidently about her healing journey. Marcus felt emotion rise in his throat. "Mrs. Chen, I still don't know how to adequately thank you for seeing what I couldn't see and refusing to give up on either of us. Watching Emma become the child she was always meant to be Is thanks enough?" Mrs. Chen replied. "But more than that, watching your family's story give hope to other families, that's the greatest gift you could give." As they gathered their belongings and prepared to leave, Emma tugged on Marcus's sleeve.
"Dad,
"Did you see how many people said our story helped them feel less alone?" Marcus knelt down to Emma's eye level, still amazed by her perspective and insight. "What did you think about sharing our story tonight?" "It felt really good," Emma said thoughtfully. "Like maybe the hard things we went through can help prevent other families from having to be as scared and sad as we were." Marcus hugged his daughter, marveling at her ability to find meaning and purpose in their shared struggles. "Emma, I'm so proud of your courage in sharing your experience tonight." "I'm proud of you too, Dad," Emma replied. "Ask for help and for showing other parents that it's okay to not have all the answers." As they walked to their car under the evening stars, with Buddy waiting patiently in the back seat, Marcus reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. The desperate father who had stumbled into Mrs. Chen's classroom, seeking his lost daughter, had found not only Emma, but also himself. They were no longer just surviving. They were thriving, contributing, and creating ripples of healing that extended far beyond their own family. Their story had become a gift they could offer to others, proof that even the most overwhelming challenges could become sources of strength and connection. "What should we do tomorrow?" Emma asked, as they drove home through their familiar neighborhood. Marcus smiled, no longer feeling overwhelmed by open-ended questions or his daughter's natural enthusiasm for planning and dreaming. "Whatever we want," he replied. "We have all the time in the world to figure it out together." 6 months later, Marcus stood in the doorway of Emma's bedroom, watching his daughter arrange stuffed animals in a circle on her bed. She was reading aloud to them from a chapter book, using different voices for each character and pausing to explain plot points to her captive audience. The sight filled him with a joy so profound it still surprised him. "Emma, are you ready for our Saturday adventure?" Marcus called out, smiling at the elaborate production his daughter had created. Emma looked up with bright eyes, no longer scanning his face for signs of stress or sadness before responding to his question. I'm just finishing chapter 3 for everyone. Fluffy gets really upset if we stop in the middle of exciting parts." Marcus chuckled, remembering when Emma's conversations had been carefully calculated to avoid any mention of wants, needs, or preferences. Now, she spoke freely about her stuffed animal's fictional emotional needs while confidently expressing her own real ones. "Take your time," Marcus said. "Buddy and I will wait in the kitchen." At the mention of his name, a golden retriever appeared in the hallway, tail wagging enthusiastically. Buddy had joined their family 3 months earlier. After Emma had finally asked directly if they could visit the shelter together, just to look, and Marcus had fallen in love with the same dog Emma had been secretly visiting during her volunteer shifts, the adoption process had been Emma's first major lesson in asking for something significant without justifying its necessity for family survival. Dr. Martinez had helped her practice expressing the simple truth: "I want a dog because I think it would make our family happier." When Marcus had agreed, Emma had cried with relief that wanting something for joy alone was enough reason to pursue it. Emma finished her reading session and bounded into the kitchen, where Marcus was packing a picnic lunch. "Dad, I'm so excited about today. Do you think the greenhouse kit will be as complicated as it looked in the videos?" Today marked the beginning of their most ambitious family project yet, building the greenhouse Emma had painted in her someday house artwork. What had started as a creative vision had evolved into a carefully planned reality when Marcus realized that sharing projects with Emma brought them both more happiness than any individual purchase ever could. "It might be pretty challenging," Marcus admitted, spreading peanut butter on sandwiches. "Oh, but that's part of what makes it exciting, right? We'll figure it out together, and if we get stuck, we can ask Tom for help." Emma nodded enthusiastically, no longer interpreting challenges as problems she needed to solve independently. "Uncle Tom is really good at reading instruction manuals. And Mrs. Rodriguez said she wants to help us choose what plants to grow first." The involvement of extended family and community members in their projects had been one of the most healing changes in their lives. Emma had slowly learned that accepting help from multiple adults didn't mean Marcus was failing as a father, but rather that they were part of a loving community. Speaking of Mrs. Rodriguez, she asked if you'd like to help her make tamales next week for her grandson's birthday party, Marcus said, watching Emma's face light up at the invitation. Really? She wants me to help with something important like that? Emma asked, still sometimes surprised when adults sought her participation rather than her caretaking. She said, "You have excellent measuring skills and very careful hands," Marcus replied. "Plus she enjoys your company." Emma beamed with pride at being valued for age-appropriate abilities rather than emotional labor. "Can we bring some tamales to Mrs. Chen? Want to tell her about my science project on plant growth cycles?" Mrs. Chen remained a significant presence. In their lives, though, their relationship had evolved from crisis intervention to genuine mentorship. Emma now stayed after school occasionally by choice rather than necessity, working on advanced projects that challenged her academically without burdening her emotionally. "I'm sure Mrs. Chen would love that," Marcus said. "She's very proud of how well you're doing in her enrichment program." Emma had been selected for the school's gifted education program 2 months earlier, finally able to demonstrate her intellectual abilities now that anxiety no longer interfered with her performance. The girl who had once left test questions blank rather than risk being wrong now eagerly tackled complex problems and celebrated mistakes as learning opportunities. "Dad, can I tell you something?" Emma asked, her tone becoming more serious as they finished packing their supplies. Marcus sat down at the table, giving Emma his full attention. These conversations had become treasured moments when Emma shared insights, concerns, or observations without the filter of protecting his feelings. "Yesterday, Jennifer told me her parents are definitely getting divorced, and she was really sad about it," Emma began. "And I realized something different about how I wanted to help her." Marcus listened, knowing that Emma's interactions with distressed classmates had become a measure of her own healing progress. "Before, I would have tried to think of ways to fix her parents' marriage or make Jennifer feel better by doing things for her," Emma continued. "But instead, I just listened to her talk about how she was feeling. And then I told Mrs. Chen that Jennifer might need extra support right now." Marcus felt pride swell in his chest. "That sounds like you knew exactly how to be a good friend without taking on adult responsibilities." "Dr. Martinez was right about how caring for people is different from carrying their problems," Emma said. "But I wanted to help her get help from grown-ups, instead of trying to be the grown-up myself." This shift in Emma's approach to others' distress had been one of the most significant indicators of her emotional healing. She maintained her natural compassion while developing appropriate boundaries. "Emma, I'm really proud of how you handled that situation," Marcus said. "You showed Jennifer that you care about her, and you made sure she had adult support for a problem that's too big for kids to solve." Emma smiled, then looked thoughtful again. "Dad, there's something else I want to talk about. Something about Mom." Marcus felt the familiar tightness in his chest that still accompanied conversations about Sarah, though the anxiety was now manageable rather than overwhelming. "What about Mom?" he asked gently. "I've been thinking about the stories you've been telling me about her and about the videos we watched together," Emma said. "And I realized that I want to do something to remember her that's about celebrating." Instead of worrying, over the past months, Marcus had begun sharing positive memories of Sarah with Emma. Replacing the careful silence he'd maintained out of misguided protection, they'd looked through photo albums, watched home videos, and talked about Sarah's personality, dreams, and the love she'd had for both of them. "What kind of celebrating were you thinking about?" Marcus asked. Emma's expression brightened with excitement. "You know how Mom loved gardening, and she always wanted to grow her own vegetables? I was thinking we could dedicate part of our greenhouse to growing the things she loved most. We could make it Mom's garden inside our greenhouse." Marcus felt tears well up, but they were tears of joy rather than the overwhelming grief that had characterized his emotions for so long. "Emma, I think that's a beautiful way to honor Mom's memory. And maybe we could invite her parents to help us plant the first seeds?" Emma continued. "I know Grandma and Grandpa Peterson miss her too, and they might like having a project that reminds them of good things about Mom instead of sad things." Marcus marveled at his daughter's emotional intelligence and her growing ability to consider multiple people's needs while expressing her own desires. Sarah's parents had struggled to maintain a relationship with Emma after the accident, overwhelmed by their own grief and unsure how to connect with their granddaughter's pain. I think Grandma and Grandpa would love to be part of that project, Marcus said. Mom always said her love of gardening came from helping her mother in their backyard when she was your age. Emma nodded eagerly. Dr. Martinez said that loving someone who died doesn't have to be about being sad all the time. She said we can love Mom by doing things that would make her happy if she could see us. The wisdom in Emma's words reflected months of therapeutic work in learning to process grief as love rather than guilt. She'd gradually developed a relationship with her mother's memory that included joy, gratitude, and connection rather than just loss and responsibility. Emma, I think Mom would be so proud of the person you're becoming, Marcus said, meaning every word. She would love seeing how smart and kind and creative you are. And she'd be proud of you too, Dad, Emma said seriously. For learning how to take care of yourself and for building such a good life for us. Marcus reached across the table and squeezed Emma's hand, amazed by her capacity for insight and encouragement. The child who had once monitored his emotions with anxiety now offered genuine support from a place of security rather than fear. Are you ready to go start building our greenhouse? Marcus asked, standing and gathering their supplies. Yes. Emma exclaimed, her excitement infectious. And Dad? As they loaded their materials into the truck, with Buddy supervising from the passenger seat, Marcus reflected on the transformation their lives had undergone. The desperate, exhausted man who had stumbled into Mrs. Chin's classroom 6 months earlier barely resembled the father he'd become. Emma chattered excitedly about their plans as they drove toward the home improvement store, her voice filled with anticipation rather than careful monitoring of his reactions. She talked about which vegetables they might grow, how they could organize the greenhouse for maximum efficiency, and whether Buddy would enjoy having a warm space to nap during winter months. As they walked into the store together, Marcus realized that they were no longer just surviving. The man who had once been too proud to accept help was now part of a thriving community of support. The child who had once carried adult responsibilities was now dreaming age-appropriate dreams and contributing her gifts in healthy ways. Emma, Marcus said as they found a shopping cart, I want you to know that these past 6 months have been some of the happiest of my life. Even though they've also been some of the hardest work I've ever done. Emma looked up at him with a smile. That was pure sunshine. Mine too, Dad. I like our life so much better when we're both allowed to need things and want things, and help each other without being scared. As they walked through the store together, consulting Emma's carefully researched list and debating the merits of different greenhouse features, Marcus marveled at the simple joy of shared decision-making. They were a father and daughter building something beautiful together, supported by a community that cared about their well-being, and honoring the memory of someone they both loved. When they loaded their purchases into the truck, Emma turned to Marcus with sparkling eyes. Dad, I can't wait to see what we build together. Marcus looked at his daughter, truly looked at her, and saw not the careful caretaker she'd been forced to become, but the joyful, creative, secure child she was meant to be. Me too, sweetheart, me too. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.